His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna pṛṣṭam Bhutale Śrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Today we're reading from the 3rd canto, the 14th chapter, titled Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening, the 5th verse. I guess we'll do word for word while we're waiting. Maitreya uvāca, sādhu, vīra, tvayā, pṛṣṭam, avatāra-kathāṁ, hareḥ, yat, tvam, pṛcchasi, martyānāṁ, mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm. Maitreya uvāca, sādhu vīra tvayā pṛṣṭam, avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ, tvam pṛcchasi martyānām, mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm. Maitreya uvāca, sādhu vīra tvayā pṛṣṭam, avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ, tvam pṛcchasi martyānām, mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm. Maitreya uvāca, sādhu vīra tvayā pṛṣṭam, avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ, tvam pṛcchasi martyānām, mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm. Please repeat. Maitreya uvāca, sādhu vīra tvayā pṛṣṭam, avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ, tvam pṛcchasi martyānām, mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm. Maitreya uvāca, sādhu vīram tvayā pṛṣṭam, avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ, tvam pṛcchasi martyānām, mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm. Maitreya uvāca, sādhu vīra tvayā pṛṣṭam, avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ, tvam pṛcchasi martyānām, mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm. Maitreya uvāca, sādhu vīra tvayā pṛṣṭam, avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ, tvam pṛcchasi martyānām, mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm.
uvāca sādhu vīra tvayā pṛṣṭam avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ
avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ
tvam pṛcchasi martyānām
tvam pṛcchasi martyānām
mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm
mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm Maitreya uvāca sādhu vīra tvayā pṛṣṭam avatāra-kathāṁ hareḥ tvam pṛcchasi martyānām mṛtyu-pāśa-viśātanīm. Mother? Maitreya uvāca. Maitreya said, Sādhu, devotee, vīra, O warrior, tvayā, by you, pṛṣṭam, inquired, avatāra-kathāṁ, topics on the incarnation of the Lord, hareḥ, of the personality of Godhead, yat, that which, tvam, your good self, pṛcchasi, asking me, martyānām, of those who are destined for death, mṛtyu-pāśa, the chain of birth and death, viśātanīm, source of liberation. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The great sage Maitreya said, O warrior, the inquiry made by you is just befitting a devotee because it concerns the incarnation of the personality of Godhead. He is the source of liberation from the chain of birth and death for all those who are otherwise destined to die. Purport. The great sage Maitreya addressed Vidura as a warrior, not only because Vidura belonged to the Kuru family, but because he was anxious to hear about the chivalrous activities of the Lord in his incarnations of Varaha and Nrsimha. Because the inquiries concerned the Lord, they were perfectly befitting a devotee. A devotee has no taste for hearing anything mundane. There are many topics of mundane welfare, but a devotee is not inclined to hear them. The topics of the warfare in which the Lord engages do not concern the war of death, but the war against the chain of Maya, which obliges one to accept repeated birth and death. In other words, one who takes delight in hearing the war topics of the Lord is relieved from the chains of birth and death. Foolish people are suspicious of Krishna's taking part in the battle of Kurukshetra, not knowing that his taking part ensured liberation for all who were present on the battlefield. It is said by Bhishma Dev that all who were present on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attained their original spiritual existences after death. Therefore, hearing the war topics of the Lord is as good as any other devotional service. Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakrurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya-manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Gadamahyam Darati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitangscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kantha Radha Kantha Namostute Tapta Kantana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna pṛṣṭhāya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vikasa Swami Niti Namine Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna pṛṣṭhāya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paśṭatya Deshatarine. Translation again. The great sage Maitreya said, O warrior, the inquiry made by you is just befitting a devotee because it concerns the incarnation of the Personality of Godhead. He is the source of liberation from the chain of birth and death for all those who are otherwise destined to die. So Maitreya here is talking to Vidura, and Vidura is curious to hear the pastimes of Lord Varaha. And as Maitreya Muni starts to speak further, he addresses Vidura, O warrior. So I was reading this and I was wondering, why is he addressing Vidura as a warrior? Because we know that Vidura's father, who is Vidura's father? We're going to have a little lineage pop quiz. Vishnu Chitta Prabhu, you can please refrain from speaking, because I know you know. Okay, so who's Vidura's father? His father is Vyasadeva. And who is his mother? We don't really know. But we know she was a Shudrani, a maidservant in the palace of Dhritarashtra. So Vidura belongs to the Kuru family, and therefore he is addressed as O warrior, even though his mother is a Shudrani and his father is a Brahmana. So you're wondering, why is he being addressed as a warrior? Because he's not a warrior. But he belongs to the Kuru dynasty, and the Kuru dynasty is given so much respect that anybody belonging to this dynasty gets that kind of respect. So Vidura is addressed as a warrior. And so yeah, I didn't know Vyasadeva was the father of Vidura before preparing for this class. But I looked a little more into the genealogy of the family of the Kuru dynasty. So we're going to start with Maharaj Shantanu, who is Maharaj Shantanu's son. Bhishmadev is one of his sons. Vichitravirya was also one of his sons, right? And so from Vichitravirya Maharaj had two daughters, Ambika and Ambalika. So Ambika and Ambalika, from their wombs they gave birth to respectively Dhritarashtra and Pandu. So you have from Maharaj Shantanu, Vichitravirya is his son, and then Vichitravirya has two daughters. And so then you have Ambika and Ambalika is Vichitravirya's daughters.
Ambika and Ambalika were daughters of somebody else. They were married
To Vichitravirya.
and then Vichitravirya died. He was killed.
Uh-huh.
So then, anyways, yeah, that's the only detail we got wrong.
Okay.
Not daughters, they're his wives.
Vichitravirya's wives are Ambika and Ambalika, you were saying?
Yeah. So
Okay.
basically they all wanted to marry Vishnu.
Uh-huh.
They couldn't get married. He got them for Vichitravirya, and Vichitravirya is
Oh, okay.
he's a wimp. He's not a very chivalrous king.
Uh-huh.
He couldn't get his own wives. So his older brother had to get him wives, which was Bhishma.
I I see.
within which Jita-Girish was killed. So then Vyasa was the half.
Begot. Okay, Vyasa. Sorry. Yeah. There, that makes sense. Yeah. So, more or less, Vichitravirya was impotent, more or less. And so, Vyasadeva, united with Ambika and Ambalika, and they had the sons Dhritarashtra and Pandu. And then, aside from that, Vyasadeva had a son with a Shudrani, and that son was Vidura. So Vidura was born into this situation, in an unfortunate low-class situation, because in his past life he was Yamaraj, and Yamaraj was cursed to be born in this kind of position. And so that's Vidura's position. Anyways, he's not exactly a warrior, but he's addressed here as a warrior because of the respect he's given due to being born in the Kuru dynasty. So the bulk of this purport is speaking about the process of hearing, particularly hearing transcendental subject matters, the pastimes of the incarnations of the personality of Godhead. And Vidura was very anxious to hear about this. Srila Prabhupada saying, because the inquiries concerned the Lord, they were perfectly befitting a devotee. Bhagavad Gita 10.9 is a verse, Matchita madgata prana bodhayantaf parasparam kathayantascha mam nityam tushyanticha ramanticha. This is in the, I guess you can call it the Chatur Shloki of the Bhagavad Gita, the middle of the Bhagavad Gita, 4 verses which are essential to the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. I believe it's texts 8 through 12. But anyways, the 9th verse, which I just recited, relates heavily to this purport. The translation, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So this is a symptom of a devotee, as he's always hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. And in the assembly of devotees, they get together and they speak about the Lord, and they relish the Lord's pastimes. They gain great transcendental pleasure from discussing these things. And this is a form of sadhana. So every day we have Srimad Bhagavatam class. Every day we're supposed to read. Our Guru Maharaj wants us to read, or Bhakti Vikas Maharaj wants his disciples to read at least an hour a day. And so this hearing and chanting is very much part of our sadhana. And we can go on engaging in devotional service. We can clean the pots, distribute books, fix cars, whatever it may be. But if we're not hearing and chanting, then if we're a neophyte, we're not likely to remain on the transcendental platform, because we constantly need to be reminded why we're here. Why did I give up mundane association? Why am I not pursuing material sense gratification? Why do I not want to be part of a degraded civilization? So we constantly have to hear from Srila Prabhupada, who preached to us and convinced us through his devotees and through his books to surrender to the process of Krishna consciousness. And so we constantly need to immerse our minds in these subject matters, immerse our minds in Prabhupada's books, and listen to the Srimad Bhagavatam classes so that we stay engaged. We keep our mind engaged in transcendence. So there's you don't have to, well, I guess you could pull this up. Okay, yeah, you could pull this up. Bhagavad Gita 10.9, verse that we're on. And then the second paragraph in the purport. In the preliminary stage of devotional service, they relish the transcendental pleasure from the service itself, and in the mature stage, they're actually situated in love of God. Once situated in that transcendental position, they can relish the highest perfection, which is exhibited by the Lord in his abode. So I was just speaking on, we have to hear and chant by performing our service, but we definitely, at least in our position, we shouldn't be bhajanānandis or try to artificially imitate this position of being a bhajanānandi. So there's two categories, bhajanānandis and ghoshtyānandis. Ghoshtyānandis are concerned with the welfare of others. And so this is typified by the example of the preacher who goes out and distributes books or goes to colleges and talks to people and, smashes misconceptions, gives people the process of Krishna consciousness, etc., out of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. And this endears one very much to Krishna, because Krishna sees, look how much this devotee is struggling for me. Not just struggling, Krishna's thinking, not just struggling for me, but struggling for the fallen conditioned souls, my parts and parcels who have forgotten my transcendental nature and pastimes and activities. And so by giving Krishna consciousness to others, we become very dear to Krishna. So this is the Ghoshtyānandi process, and then there's, in our Sampradaya and in Vaishnava culture and society, there are also the bhajanānandis who engage in bhajan. They go to secluded places, they go to caves, they go to the Himalayan mountains, they go to wherever it may be, and they engage in bhajan. So they sit in solitary places, maybe they write bhajans, but they just engage in hearing and chanting. So they're concerned with their own welfare, which is, it's okay. It's not that just because they're doing that they're bogus. But at least for us, the process we've been given is to aspire after being ghoshtyānandis. So anyways, we shouldn't get diverted in solitude and only focus on our own spiritual lives and only hear and chant, but we must engage in practical service also. Why? Well, one reason is that due to the backgrounds we're coming from, being heavily in the modes of passion and ignorance, we need to engage our passionate propensities in a productive way. Because, I think Srila Prabhupada, I'll just paraphrase, but he definitely said something along the lines of, you try to go off in a solitary place, you'll just eat, sleep, and fall down. So we're not qualified to do that, at least most of us. So therefore, we need to engage our passionate propensities or our creative propensities, our youthful energy in doing practical things. We've been prescribed chanting 16 rounds, reading some every day, hearing the classes, attending the morning programs. But aside from that, we should engage all of our time in doing practical things to push on Srila Prabhupada's movement, push on the movement of Lord Chaitanya. Otherwise, idle's mind is a devil's workshop. So we need to constantly be engaged. And that's the problem with trying to artificially be a bhajanānandi, is that if we're not on that platform, we may sit down and just try to read a book all day, but then, our mind may just be meditating on so many other nonsense things. What to speak of trying to do that day in and day out. So anyways, Srila Prabhupada's saying, in the preliminary stage of devotional service, they relish the transcendental pleasure from the service itself. And so we have practical experience of that when we're first coming in association with the devotees. Whether it be, cleaning the dishes in the kitchen, you have the music blaring and it's just super intense and you're all just like, just trying to clean all the kitchen. It could be a lot of fun actually. Or you're distributing books and you just like, Mahotsa Prabhu, he's got like 10 minutes left in the day and he wants to distribute 5 more Srimad Bhagavatam sets and it's like, it's really fun. So we need to engage in practical service. We need to engage our intensity, our passionate youth in Krishna's service. Otherwise, it'll be diverted in so many nonsense things. And once we get purified by the service itself, then we actually become qualified to hear and chant more. Meaning, these things are revealed to us as we become purified by devotional service, and then we're able to relish the pastimes of Krishna more and more. In this connection, I wasn't planning on pulling this up, but there's a nice verse, I believe it's 439 in the Bhagavad Gita. You don't have to pull it up. I'm just going to read the translation. But it relates to book distribution. I find it relates to book distribution at least. It's 439. A faith shraddhava labhate jnanam tatpara sangyatendriyaha jnanam labdva param shantim atirernadhigacchati. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains to the supreme spiritual peace. So, what does it mean to be dedicated to knowledge? Dedicated to transcendental knowledge? Well, I first fell in love with this verse when I was distributing books. Being dedicated to transcendental knowledge. So being dedicated to book distribution and seeing the actual value in these books and really dedicating yourself wholly and solely to the activity of giving this knowledge to others. So one who does this is dedicated to such knowledge, and one who subdues his senses. So one who gives up his own desires for sense gratification in pursuit of serving the knowledge, serving the books of Srila Prabhupada, which is a form of Krishna. One is eligible to achieve such knowledge. So when we do this, when we subdue our senses, we're dedicated to this knowledge, then we're eligible to achieve the knowledge. So the knowledge becomes revealed to us. And then we attain the supreme spiritual peace. So continuing in 10.9, once situated in that transcendental position, they can relish the highest perfection which is exhibited by the Lord in his abode. Lord Chaitanya likens transcendental devotional service to the sowing of a seed in the heart of the living entity. There are innumerable living entities traveling throughout the different planets of the universe, and out of them there are a few who are fortunate enough to meet a pure devotee and get the chance to understand devotional service. This devotional service is just like a seed, and if it is sown in the heart of a living entity, and if he goes on hearing and chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, that seed fructifies, just as the seed of a tree fructifies with regular watering. The spiritual plant of devotional service gradually grows and grows until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and enters into the Brahma Jyoti effulgence in the spiritual sky. In the spiritual sky also, that plant grows more and more until it reaches the highest planet, which is called Goloka Vrindavan, the supreme planet of Krishna. Ultimately, the plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and rests there. Gradually, as a plant grows fruits and flowers, that plant of devotional service also produces fruits. And the watering process in the form of chanting and hearing goes on. This plant of devotional service is fully described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19. It is explained there that when the complete plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, one becomes fully absorbed in love of God. Then he cannot live a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord, just as a fish cannot live without water. In such a state, the devotee actually attains transcendental qualities in contact with the Supreme Lord. So, this is describing watering of the Bhakti Lata Bij. And eventually it fructifies. And what does it fructify in? It fructifies in pure love of God. And so this is described, as it's said here in the Madhya Lila chapter 19, wherein there's the verse, Brahmite, how does it start? Brahmanda Brahmite Kaun Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prashare Bhai, Bhakti Lata Bij. How one, by the mercy of Guru, one gets, no. Is that the right verse?
Guru and Krishna.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one's been wandering in this material world, and by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, one gets the seed of devotional service. And so, the last paragraph of this purport explains, the Srimad Bhagavatam is also full of such narrations about the relationship between the Supreme Lord and his devotees. Therefore, the Srimad Bhagavatam is very dear to the devotees, as stated in the Bhagavatam itself. In this narration, there is nothing about material activities, economic development, sense gratification, or liberation. Srimad Bhagavatam is the only narration in which the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord and his devotees is fully described. So, the Srimad Bhagavatam, it exclusively describes pure devotional service, which makes it unique from other Vedic literatures. It doesn't promote sense gratification, liberation, economic development, material activities, but it focuses purely on the goal of life, Krishna prema. So similarly, we should also have this goal in mind in whatever activities we're doing, and we should not be diverted by any tinge of material desires. Rupa Goswami says the verse, Anyabhilashata shunyam jnanakarmadhyanavratam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttama. So one should be free from any traces of jnana or karma and purely seek the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. Through the spiritual master, we need to do this. So the Bhagavatam explains this process. It explains the process. So many devotees, so many dynasties, lineages, and how all these different personalities attain perfection. And like this, it sets beautiful examples for us. Not only of nitya siddhas, but also sadhana siddhas, or those that have achieved perfection through practice, through their sadhana. Because we need that example. Otherwise, the path of pure devotional service seems completely unpractical. Something off in the distance, unattainable to us because we're so degraded in this age of Kali. And so there's examples of personalities like Ajamil and so many examples. And then also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a lot of examples there. Examples of how seemingly fallen people have become great devotees and perfected their lives. And so this serves as inspiration and example for us. Finishing this purport, thus the realized souls in Krishna consciousness take continual pleasure in hearing such transcendental literatures, just as a young boy and girl take pleasure in association. So, just as a young boy and a young girl take pleasure in association, it's often said that whatever Srila Prabhupada says is quoting some verse. So anyways, this verse is from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-2-239. Yuvatīnām yatā yuni yunām ca yuvatau yatā. Mano bhiramate tadvan mano me ramatam tvayī. Translation: just as the minds of young women delight in young men, and the minds of young men in young women, may my mind similarly delight in you. So the devotee prays that, and I think it was, which acharya was it? Who was with the prostitute, and the prostitute was his guru. Bilvamangala Thakur, yeah. So there's an example of Bilvamangala Thakur. And upon unity with a prostitute, he went through so much difficulty. He crossed a river by holding on to a floating dead body through a storm just to go to the house of a prostitute and engage in illicit sex. The prostitute looked at him and was, "What are you doing with your life? If you were all this devotion you have for me, if you simply engage that in Krishna consciousness, then you would be so far elevated." And then he snapped out of it and attained perfection. And then, he manifested the past times of having some difficulties on that path, even after that. But, he's our acharya. So that example is there. So just as the minds of young women are attracted to young men, and young men were attracted to young women, similarly, we should have that attraction for Krishna, because this attraction for these material bodies, it's ultimately, what is this material body? It's just a combination of bone, fat, blood, mucus, all nasty ingredients that if we separate them and look at what the body is factually, it's completely disgusting. Yeah, enough said about that. So continuing with today's purport, a devotee has no taste for hearing anything mundane. There are many topics of mundane warfare, but a devotee is not inclined to hear of them. So, there's so many, there's the vīra rasa, or the chivalrous rasa, heroic kind of spirit, and then there's also ugra, more like, violent, all these kind of things. There's actually some rasa in it, and people enjoy this. D-Day, yeah, D-Day. And then there's so many movies. I remember, I'm not going to go into what movie it was, but I saw this movie with my mom when I was pretty young. It was one of the new superhero movies. And, classic thing, the superhero has this ability, but he's keeping it a secret, and there's a girl that's there, and then, there's some chemistry, and then eventually she realizes, oh, he's Superman, and then pure love emits. But anyways, in this stupid movie, this is like the really foreground of the plot. This is this boy and the superhero and the woman. But meanwhile, it's just complete destruction. There's like a whole metropolis, and it just gets completely demolished. And the whole movie is like, almost from start to finish, it's just destruction, destruction, destruction. And eventually you're just like, okay, what's the point of this? Because it's just back to back to back. This building falls, that building falls, that building falls, and it's just like 30 minutes of buildings falling. And I remember after the movie, my mom was like, that was a terrible movie. It was just nothing but destruction. And so, anyways. But then we see in the pastimes of the Srimad Bhagavatam and whatnot, there's so much destruction that takes place, so much violence. But it doesn't become oversaturated because it's the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And whatever is related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, rather than having a saturation point, when the more and more you hear it, the more and more it becomes ecstatic. But in mundane warfare movies, the more and more destruction takes place, it just becomes so pointless and tasteless. And so anyways, there's so many, mundane cinema movies, and all of them are basically the same. It's like members of the opposite sex, or maybe even same sex nowadays, or, one of the 81 sexes or whatever they say nowadays, unifying together, or maybe multiple of many different kinds of sexes unifying together, who knows? There's all sorts of permutations and combinations of genders and sexes, and, people fascinated with their material identities to the point where they just get completely speculative in identifying with this and that. So anyways, kind of going off on a tangent, but mundane cinema is chewing the chewed. There's so many permutations and combinations of superheroes and this and that, but ultimately it's the same thing. It's just sex attraction disguised in some different package, but it's just chewing the chewed. And we've tasted this sexual pleasure life after life, and ultimately we're not satisfied. We've gone from this species to that species because nothing has satisfied us. So finally we're in the human form of life, and we should not be so foolish to watch mundane cinema and further get bounded up in the chains of the material modes of nature, which these cinema movies are made under. These directors and actors, and for the most part, the completely meat eaters engaged in sinful activities. And so by associating with such people, through watching them, through hearing about them, we develop their qualities. Because just as the iron associated with the fire becomes like hot like fire and can burn things. Similarly, whatever you associate with, you become like that. So if we watch these nonsense movies, if we associate with this nonsense media, endless crap on this thing, then we'll become dull like a jellyfish. So continuing reading from today's purport. The topics of the warfare in which the Lord engages do not concern the war of death, but the war against the chain of Maya, which obliges one to accept repeated birth and death. And so, associating with the Lord is a way of destroying, is how we overcome our anartas. The Supreme Lord has the mercy to completely destroy, crush our anartas to nil. And there's this verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is chanted by Prahlad Maharaj, but in the Bhagavatam it appears in prayers by the residents of Jambudvip. It's 5.18.8. Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Namaste Jaste Jase Avir Bhava Vajranaka Vajradangshta Karmashayan Rantaya Tamo Grasa Om Svaha Abhayam Atmani Bhuyishtha Om Krom. I'm just going to pull this up real quick. Nice. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Lord Nrsimhadev, the source of all power. O my Lord, who possesses nails and teeth, just like thunderbolts, kindly vanquish our demon-like desires for fruitive activity in this material world. Please appear in our hearts and drive away our ignorance, so that by your mercy we may become fearless in the struggle for existence in this material world. And so praying to Nrsimhadev is particularly beneficial and recommended if we're struggling with mundane sex desire or struggling with our anartas, if we're having problems with our family members, even I've heard. I mean, worshiping the Supreme Lord's good for anything, but different forms of the Lord you can worship in different moods. So anyways, if we worship Nrsimhadev, he'll crush our material desires, as this verse is describing. What is it? Rantaya means fleeing. And what is crushing? Is there something like that in this? Rantaya, yeah. Grasa means kindly drive away. So anyways, by worshiping Lord Nrsimhadev, he can drive away and crush all of our material desires. In the purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada says, one cannot stop the repetition of birth and death without being completely desireless. And so, of course, as devotees, we understand that to be completely desireless doesn't mean to have no desire at all, to be completely inert like a dull stone, but it means to have no material desire. And so if we have any slight trace of material desire, the repetition of birth and death will continue, as it's saying. One cannot stop the repetition of birth and death without being completely desireless. And so we definitely need the mercy of the Lord to help us get rid of our mundane desires, because we're powerless in the face of Maya. But daivi hiesham gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mam evaye prapadyante maya metam durantite. This divine nature, Krishna is saying, this divine nature of mine is very difficult to overcome, but one who surrenders unto me can easily cross beyond it. So it becomes easy because Maya is subordinate to Krishna. So when we surrender to Krishna, who's the supreme Purusha, then he can completely take control over our lives. And Maya is powerless, comparatively. So Bhagavad Gita 6:37, also relating on this topic. in the purport. Anyways, it's in the purport. So Arjuna is, anyways, he's doubting the process of Krishna consciousness. He's saying, oh, what if I commit to it, but kind of don't commit to it, and I kind of fall away, and I don't attain spiritual perfection, but then I don't attain material perfection either, and oh my God, what is the point at that point, and how am I going to, prosper in any sphere? But Krishna says, calm down, whatever progress you make on this path, you'd never lose that. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport to this verse, to pursue the transcendental path is to more or less declare war against the illusory energy. Whenever a person tries to escape the clutches of the illusory energy, she tries to defeat the practitioner by various allurements. So Srila Prabhupada says this again and again. This is there was a whole list. I looked up, declare war against the illusory energy. There was a whole list of quotes. So I just picked one. But Srila Prabhupada says this, that, to take to devotional service is to declare war against the material energy. Our conditioning. What does that mean? It means to kind of declare war on one's own mind, or declare war against the idea of being a materialist. No, I'm not going to be a materialist. And it takes some force because the mind naturally gravitates towards stupid thoughts. So it takes some force, some strong determination to cut down this tree. It's compared to the banyan tree in the Bhagavad Gita. So one must cut down this tree, the tree of fruit of activity, one's anchor in material existence. One must cut it down with the knowledge of detachment. I'm kind of combining many verses here, but this is kind of one of the points of the Bhagavad Gita is to cut off our detachment with the material world through knowledge by engaging in Shravan Kirtan. And so when we take to this path, as it's saying here, Maya has many allurements, and she tries to trick us, not out of being an enemy or not out of being malicious. Maya is not malicious. Maya is a servant of the Supreme Lord, a devotee. But it's the system that Krishna set up. That's Maya's service, is to give us these tests, to show, are you ready? Are you ready for Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundara Achintya Gunasvarupam Govindamari Pṛṣṭam Tamaham Bhajami. Are you ready to apply the ointment of pure love to your eyes and fully relish Shama Sundara in your heart all the time? Are you ready to give up all this nonsense, material existence? And so anyways, we're powerless to fight this war on our own. We need the association of devotees. We need the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya is our knight in shining armor. And what is his weapon? Srila Jiva Goswami says that his astra is his beauty. His weapon is his beauty. So Lord Chaitanya comes in this age of Kali and kills the demons, not like Varaha does, or Nrsimhadev, or Parashuram, Ramachandra, Bhagavan. Not like that, but by destroying the demoniac mentality which is within us. So Lord Chaitanya helps in this regard, and then from Lord Chaitanya, the parampara continues down, and all of our acharyas are our heroes, because they give transcendental knowledge, which is our path out of this material world. So we should take shelter of the parampara, of our spiritual master, and try to be humble and humbly submit ourselves at the lotus feet, and just try to exist as a menial servant, doing whatever small thing we can do to assist the spiritual master in his mission. And the spiritual master, it doesn't matter, if you're a fool and you're not good for anything. It doesn't matter. If you simply submit yourself and you submitly try to be sincere, then the guru, the acharyas will give their mercy. And so there's no doubt about it. No matter who you are, if you submit yourself to this process, if you try to be sincere, if you try to be humble, then you will be helped. You will receive the mercy. So continuing with today's purport. Foolish people are suspicious of Krishna's taking part in the battle of Kurukshetra, not knowing that his taking part ensured liberation for all who were present on the battlefield. So, avajananti ma mudha manushim tanamashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. In the Bhagavad Gita, oh, I wrote down the wrong verse. Okay, fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They don't know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. So, what do they not know? They don't know that Krishna is Mukunda, as it's describing here. They don't know that Krishna is the giver of liberation. They criticize him for taking part in battles. But they don't know that whatever the Supreme Lord does is not destructive. It may appear to be destructive, but it's actually completely productive, in that it's all auspicious. For us who hear and chant about these things, it's auspicious for us. For those who Krishna kills, it's auspicious for them. And there's so many examples of this. Some examples are Putana, Aghasura, Shishupal, Kamsa, the Keshi demon, Dantavakra. The list goes on and on and on of the demons that Krishna fought with and gave liberation. And so Krishna is known as Mukunda, the giver of liberation. And this name Mukunda appears in the Vishnu Sahasranam, name 518. And fun fact, it's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam 83 times. According to the Sanskrit, Mukunda, I got this from our Guru Maharaj's lecture. According to the Sanskrit, Mukunda, it does not directly translate into the giver of liberation. Grammatically speaking, this is not typically how it would be translated, broken down, the word Mukunda. But this definition, Mukunda, the giver of liberation, is accepted by Shankaracharya and Parasharabhata, because they quote from a rishi named Parni, who says that above grammatical rules is actually the traditions of the great sages, the great people in the past that have given the real meanings of these things. So that's even superior to grammatical rules. So anyways, Krishna is Mukunda. I'll just finish reading this purport. It is said by Bhishma Dev that all who were present on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attain their original spiritual existences after death. Therefore, hearing the war topics of the Lord is as good as any other devotional service. So all who were present on the battlefield attain their original spiritual existences after death. All the devotees. Now, as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we aren't particularly aspiring for liberation, but rather liberation comes as a byproduct. Now, in other schools, they do aspire for mukti. For instance, the Sri Sampradaya, they aspire for mukti in order to facilitate their devotional service. And there's the 5 forms of liberation that are given. Sayuja, Salokya, Sarshti, Samipya, and what's the other one? Sayuja, Salokya, Sarupya, Sarshti, and Samipya. Yeah. And so 4 of these, which they're conducive for devotees actually, attaining the same form as the Lord, attaining the same abode, etc. But there's one which we do not want, which is Sayuja Mukti, impersonal liberation, not complete actually, but seemingly complete annihilation of one's individual existence, merging with the Supreme Lord in what they call Ananda, some kind of white light, some impersonal force, which we understand is the Brahma Jyoti. So devotees don't aspire for this because this is spiritual suicide, and it doesn't facilitate one's loving sentiments for the Lord, which is what devotees live for. So we're not after mukti per se, but at the same time, mukti is there, and we're not completely against it. The Gaudiya Vaishnava understanding of mukti is Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitang mang vishame bhavambudho kripaya tavapada-pankaja sthita dhuli sadrishang vichintaya. O son of Maharaj Nanda, I have fallen into this terrible ocean of nescience, but please be merciful to me and kindly place me as a particle of dust on your lotus feet. And so this is the Gaudiya idea of liberation that Lord Chaitanya gave. Is that we're not after, our motive is not to run away from distress. It's not completely out of negative impetus. Negative impetus may be there, but our motive is for Krishna. We're trying to run towards Krishna. We're trying to become like a particle of dust at his lotus feet, because that is all that is worth living for, is to be situated in devotional service. Be situated at the lotus feet of Krishna. Otherwise, we're at the lotus feet of our boss and at the lotus feet of our dogs and our cats and our wives and our, whatever other mundane permutations and combinations of material bodies and relationships. Our network, which binds us up in this material world. We fall at the feet of all these false masters, but we should realize that, I'm falling at someone's feet at the end of the day, and Lord Chaitanya is the supreme. Anyways, I might as well mention this. I forgot to mention it, but just a small point on the point that foolish people don't know Krishna's transcendental position. Srila Prabhupada says in a purport that many mundane scholars, particularly Western scholars that have no idea what they're talking about, they translate Purusha, in the Bhagavad Gita. Throughout the scriptures, Krishna is referred to as Purusha. And one meaning of Purusha is man, and then Stri is women. So Purusha, Stri is the two genders. A few words for genders. There's so many different words given for men and women. But when Purusha is, Krishna is referred to as Purusha in scripture, these mundane people that have no idea what they're talking about interpret that Krishna's just a man. But this is completely foolish, because it's said elsewhere that Krishna is Purushottam, who's the Purusha, the man, or the controller. Uttama, ultimate. So Krishna is the ultimate controller. So anyways, that was just a little side point through it and at the end. If anybody has any comments, questions, we could take those, please.
So, sādhu, nice class. In a conversation with a disciple, discussing Sartre, I don't know how it's pronounced. Is that how it's said? Sartre?
Oh, Sartre, the philosopher.
Sartre. Okay. The disciple says, since man's essential nature is an undetermined nothingness, Sartre believes that man is free to choose to be either a coward or a hero. Our situation is in our own hands. Srila Prabhupada, if you are tossed into the world by some superior power, what can you do? How can you become a hero? If you try to become a hero, you will be kicked all the more because you are placed here by superior power. If a culprit under police custody attempts to become a hero, he will actually be beaten and punished. Actually, you are neither a coward nor a hero. You are an instrument. You are completely under the control of a superior power. Disciple, well, if someone is attacking you, you have the power to choose to be a hero and defend yourself, or to run. Srila Prabhupada, it is not heroic to defend oneself. That is natural. If that is the case, even a dog can be a hero when he is attacked. Even an ant can be a hero. Heroism and cowardice are simply mental concoctions. After all, you are under the control of a power that can do what he likes with you. Therefore, there is no question of your becoming a hero or a coward. Disciple, suppose someone is in danger and you rescue him. Isn't that being heroic? Srila Prabhupada, all you rescue is the external dress. Saving that dress is not heroism. It is not even protection. One can be a real hero only when he is fully empowered or fully protected. Such a person can only be a devotee because only Krishna can fully protect or empower.
Yeah, very relevant. Completely under control is like, you could be a so-called hero standing up for yourself or standing up for someone else, but if someone's got more power than you, what are you going to do? The so-called hero is completely crushed. So it's, we're in the hands of superior forces, yeah. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
You said that bhajananandis are only concerned with their own kind of welfare, yeah.
That's one thing, yeah.
So like, for example, Gaura-Kishoras Babaji was bhajananandi, right? So does it mean that he wasn't concerned with the welfare of others, or? I was kind of confused at that point. I thought that he's like the most, like our acharyas that are bhajananandis, they're also still fully compassionate. We say compassionate for the fallen conditioned souls and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I can say is that, so you gave you said Gaura-Kishore Das Babaji, right? So I mean, he actually does help us, even though that wasn't like, in his manifest presence, that wasn't his engagement, was preaching per se, but he preached by example. And so that's another form of preaching, is being completely engaged as he was. And some acharyas, some devotees are there in that position to give that example and show what it really means to be immersed, what it means to be engaged. But that's not necessarily our position. In a pretty different way, but kind of similar, is devotees that are managers or devotees that are in the temple. They may not be going out and distributing books, but they're still preaching because they're still pushing on the movement. Similarly, devotees like Gaura-Kishore Das Babaji, they're contributing their living example to, to the culture, to the tradition, to give us those teachings.
One thing I think that's important to understand with bhajananandis is not that they shy away from preaching. It's just they're engaged in their bhajan. But when people come, Bhakti Vikas Maharaj describes, people would come to Gaura-Kishore Das Babaji and request him to speak. So then he would speak Krishna Katha.
Not all the time, right?
There's these specific that case is there that I was saying that it's not that they don't care about the conditioned souls, but they're engaged in their bhajan. But when there's an opportunity, then they may also choose to preach and give that knowledge. So it's not that they're completely recluse or off into some cave also.
Yeah.
Not all the cases of bhajananandis are like that.
Yeah, certainly. And also, I mean, there are examples of Gaura-Kishore Das Babaji, Vangshi Das Babaji too. People come to them for blessings or whatever, and they completely reject them. Like I think Vamsi Das Babaji would even sometimes shout at people and scream at them, just scare them off. Similarly, Gaura-Kishore Das Babaji, he would stay in a latrine because he didn't want these people, their cheap adoration, their fake adoration, their fake wanting of blessings. So yeah.
Yeah, what you said is right in the sense that they have a living example. And the fact that Srila Gaura-Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj had a disciple like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was engaged in preaching. The fact that he considered Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur as his guru, who was also engaged in preaching.
Gaura-Kishore Das Babaji engaged? Oh.
Yeah, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur very much appreciated Gaura-Kishore Das Babaji because, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur was against all these false Babajis and Srila Gaura-Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj was setting such a high standard that it became apparent who was a Vaishnava and who was not. And that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur highly respected. And of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also preached on those lines, and Srila Vamsidas Babaji is the same in that regard. But otherwise, generally, it is a fact, if you look at Srila Prabhupada's statements on Bhajananandi, and in general, it is criticized that they don't care for the welfare of others. This is a very general thing. Therefore, we actually do not recognize Gaur Kishoredas Babaji and Vamsidas Babaji to be a Bhajananandi in the colloquial use of the term, that we consider them Paramahamsa Babajis, who were very much concerned for the welfare of the people, but they had to play that very important role. And you're right, they're a living example. As again, Rupa Vilas Prabhu has written a book, combined book, called Babaji Maharaj, where it's both the acharyas, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji and Jagannath Das Babaji's life and exalted examples are described.
Pure principles of Gaudiya Vaishnava is preaching, because that Lord Chaitanya came to give that.
The mic.
And then we see Srila Prabhupada emphasize, especially Prahlad Maharaj. I mean, Lord Chaitanya
Yeah.
saying that Prahlad Maharaj, and we have Dhruva Maharaj as being the favorite pastimes in the Bhagavatam.
Yeah, I don't care about my own welfare. I just want
Yeah,
to see others.
we see Prahlad Maharaj very prominently in that mood. And so if we look at our line of Gaudiya, then the whole concept of Bhajananandi is also, like Prabhu was saying, is a little different, because it's all done with that under the lotus feet of Srila Rupa Goswami, who knows the heart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Yeah, a question. I've always wondered about this, that Prahlad Maharaj says that higher than saving yourself is saving others. But then Prabhupada has that one quote that the highest realization is to save yourself. You know, I mean, I can read it.
Yeah.
You know that one?
I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
so then I always wondered, like, you know,
Yeah.
the difference between the mood. Because Prabhupada also, he performed his bhajan in Vrindavan, and then he was reading, he was composed Srimad Bhagavatam, and then he came to the West. But then Prabhupada saying, actually, the highest realization is save yourself. And I always was confused about that point.
One thing, I can give a mundane example. I can think of one particular person I know who, very good heart, good person, who has the desire to serve. Not necessarily, a devotee in some respect, they come here and serve, but also serving all these non-profits, just serving whatever, just giving oneself selflessly, but giving oneself so much that completely, basically doing physical labor, doing service, but then completely breaking one's back. And that's what this person did. They completely broke their back trying to serve so much. But then you can't serve anymore. So, to save oneself, Srila Prabhupada saying the highest realization is to save oneself. One practical application of this instruction is that we need to read. We need to constantly read. It's not like, reading some Bhajananandi thing, it's some lower thing. You go out and do, distribute books, or you do something practical. What are you doing? Reading, taking a day off to read. What are you doing? You do something practical. So this is nonsense. The reason we need to save ourselves is so that we are good instruments for Lord Chaitanya. We need to make the use of our mind and body, whittle them the best way we can so that we're most useful. And that's how I see it, at least, is that the reason why you save yourself is for service, is to purify yourself and make yourself fit for offering to Krishna. And what does that mean? When you're offered to Krishna, you become Krishna's instrument. You can help others. So it's not that you completely just focus on yourself and you neglect others, because that's the highest realization. But they play hand in hand. Is that in order to really help others, you need to be fit yourself. Otherwise, if you in the mode of ignorance, try to fully give yourself, meanwhile you completely lose your mind, fall out of, your conviction in Krishna consciousness. That's a problem. Yes, Prabhu.
This is like asking Srila Prabhupada how one can please him best. You get all these multiple answers. So you can see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Janma sartha kari karo paropakar. Okay, so you have to you have to perfect yourself and then help others. Now, from one perspective, you can say that which is said first is more important than that which is said second. Another way to say it is that which is said second is more important than that which is said first. And both are true, because both exist. You understand? So it's basically to do both. This is the point.
Srila Prabhupada said,
You can't do one without the other. Both are important. You can't save somebody else without saving yourself. Therefore, saving yourself is important. But you're saving yourself to save others. Therefore, saving others is more important than saving yourself. So it is transcendentally achintya. It's supreme. Both are supreme.
yeah,
And it's like that.
One's a catalyst to the other.
one's a catalyst to the other. Yeah, I mean, Srila Prabhupada also stated that the most important activity of this Krishna consciousness movement is blank. And then there's so many ways to fill in the blank. There's so many quotes of Prabhupada saying, book distribution is the most important, scientific preaching, I mean, the list goes. Gurukuls is everything's the most important. It's all important. Do the Matajis have anything? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.